Hey everyone, Textful and White Cat are back in the house.
Hey! Sorry for this long hiatus. We were gonna drop this video somewhere in April, but we struggled with its script, and also lots of crazy stuff happened, so we decided to focus on something else until this video was uploaded. But here we are.
As such, today's video will be a little different. We're not talking about our personal history with a certain media, although there might be room for that. Today's special is Gone Too Soon, Part 1 out of 2. We'll be discussing two shows that both premiered around 15 years ago and ended after just one season.
The only difference being the premature ending for different reasons. But we'll get to that later. Right now, we're talking about one show, which is a reboot of a classic 80s cartoon. ThunderCats! Oh!
Debuting in 1985, ThunderCats was one of the many 80s cartoons created specifically to sell toys. The cartoon focused on a heroic group of cat-like alien humanoids known as the ThunderCats, led by Anno, the wielder of the Swords of Amen. The series was obviously inspired by Mattel's Masters of the Universe. In 2011, the show was rebooted on Cartoon Network. It was an attempt to breathe a new life into the source material, move away from Masters of the Universe mold, and inject it with some then fresh anime aesthetics, and focus specifically on the story. And of course, several changes resulted in the initial reaction being not that great.
Yeah, the aesthetic of this reboot did initially put people off. Even some of the most die-hard fans, such as Rob the Wonderful, were like, what is this? But when the show came out, people who saw it thought it was awesome.
Yeah, and obviously ThunderCats did require an upgrade. I mean, it debuted before Batman the Animated Series, and the X-Men revolutionized the game for animated action shows. And by the time the 2011 reboot came to be, 80s cartoons like Ninja Turtles and Transformers already went through several iterations, including more mature ones. However, ThunderCats as a franchise has always been rather niche.
At least it still had a sense of lore building, which is more than what can be said about its counterpart Silverhawks.
Yeah, but what I mean is that it's not nearly as iconic as most of its contemporaries. Like, when you think of all these 80s cartoons, the ones specifically designed to sell toys, they all had villains that went on to be very iconic. Skeletor, the Shredder, Megatron, and then there's Mumra.
Well, to be fair, he does have a cool and arguably memorable design. Also, the fact that he's powered by pure evil pretty much makes him virtually immortal. Much like that villain played by Tim Curry in that one movie. What was it called again?
It?
No, you moron! The one where he plays the devil!
Oh, haven't seen that one.
Also, Mumra feared his own reflection. Well, at least at first, before he got over that later in this series. He is still more memorable and effective as a villain than Moonstar from Silverhawks. Which is ironic considering they share a voice actor. As for the reboot, I don't really recall seeing him that much. But I guess, yeah, ThunderCats weren't nearly as popular as some of the other 80s properties. Which is a shame because, you know, the whole nostalgia lies. Something like that. And it does have a handful of things that made it age not that well. But hey, it got some of that fixed in the reboot. And it was popular enough to get a comic crossover with the pre-mentioned Masters of the Universe.
Yeah, I guess you're right. And back to a reboot, while fans weren't originally too crazy about the redesigns, I personally think it's the best these characters ever looked. Like, in the original show, they almost looked like humans, just barely mutated. Look at Lionel, for example. He looks like Peter Criss if Kiss went Technicolor. In the reboot, however, you can actually tell they're supposed to be cats. But I digress, because the show's biggest issue, in my opinion, was, well, the characters.
Yeah, you're telling me.
And I don't mean that the show didn't try to give the main cast some depth. On the contrary, some of the characters went on to have very dramatic backstories, to say the least. But I think many will agree that Chitara's character drew the shortest stick in that department. Correct me if I'm wrong, but Chitara is basically the most popular character in the franchise, judging by the amount of fan art I saw of her. So it's kinda sad that, in the reboot, she appears to be nothing more than an additional source of conflict between Lionel and Tigra.
Oh, I guess that means I'm safe to have my say on that.
Sure.
So, once they start the journey, at first, Chitara is all kissy and cuddly towards Lionel as if he was her boyfriend, being all smiley and hand-grabby and lovey-dovey like, I believe in you. And cuddly. And then by I believe the time Panthro got pretty heavily injured, she's suddenly like, oh no, Tigra, you misunderstood. I'm in love with you. If you were going to go off with Tigra in the end, then why did you glue yourself against Lionel acting all lovey-dovey, kissy, cuddly in the first place, you dunce?
C'est très simple. The love triangle trope is an easy way to engage viewers, no matter how badly written it can be.
Oh, sure. Never mind the fact that it can often lead to hating a character over something ridiculous. It's just like Sarah in CSI Las Vegas. And yes, I know the characters in CSI were never involved in a love triangle, but what I'm trying to say is that at one point in that show, Sarah did something so stupid, it ruined my view of her. The same can be said for Chitara in this show, but obviously for different reasons.
And yet, she's not the most questionably written female character in the show.
I guess so. I guess that honor goes to Palmyra.
To this day, I'm convinced that the plot twist involving her in what ended up being the series finale was a last-minute addition for shock value.
Why?
To me, it kinda came out of nowhere. The thing is, the whole deal with her being a traitor was kinda spoiled for me, so I watched those final few episodes with the plot twist in mind, and at no point did I notice any giveaway or hint to that. Maybe I'm just stupid. Because it seemed like she was genuinely growing closer to Lionel with each episode, and then suddenly, she's a traitor. What a twist!
Then again, how else would they set up a second season that never happened?
Yeah, and oh boy, what a second season it would have been. The creators of the show actually revealed some of the plot elements they planned to use in Season 2. They had planned a major time skip, with Lionel waking up like a decade later, reuniting with Tigra and Chitara, who are now parents to the show's version of Bengali, and Lionel would have been paired up with an adult version of Wily Kid.
What?
I get it. The original series doesn't have that many characters to adapt for a reboot, but couldn't they just create a new character to be his love interest?
Well, whatever the case, I'd say this is one of the better reboots in general. The character designs, well, may come off as weird at first, are still really good, and they make the characters distinguishable from each other while still being recognizable as to who they were in the original show. The personalities and the relationships were a lot more fleshed out, for better or for worse. And they did give it a stronger sense of lore and, well, occasionally taking risks in certain aspects. And yes, it did deserve so much more than to be abandoned as the way it was. You know, with Cartoon Network barely advertising the show, and just as barely advertising its merchandise, and even more so by giving it a bad video game. Some YouTubers say that the reason for its cancellation might have been the fact that LEGO released a series of sets that were supposed to be a tie-in to this show, but they renamed it into what eventually became known as Choma, which they literally gave the exact same premise as ThunderCats.
True.
Regardless of what the real reason of its cancellation may be, this show was still definitely better than that other ThunderCats reboot.
Indeed, Cat. Indeed.
To me, Roar is not only a complete insult to the franchise for obvious reasons, but it also has the same problem as some of the other shows I've seen people have a grudge against.
Ugly art style, too hyperactive, not funny.
All of the above. But I'm referring to the fact that it was brought to us after the cancellation of a series people liked. To quote Rob the Wonderful,
because you see, way back in 2011, Cartoon Network had previously rebooted ThunderCats, and, you know, even with that show, a lot of people weren't entirely sure about it, including myself. When it came out, it was awesome, and people loved it, and then after about a season, they completely ditched it, and we never heard from it again. And I truly believe that that is why people are so mad about this, because they had a show, had a good show, well-produced show, and people loved it, and then they just kind of abandoned it. But I truly believe that the backlash for ThunderCats Roar was all the residual frustration and sense of betrayal from Cartoon Network that's been just sort of festering over the years. And then, you know, they produced a really good show, and then they give us ThunderCats Roar, and people just hated it, understandably so.
You know, the more I think about reboots, like in general, there's always a clear pattern that repeats itself basically every time.
what's that?
In theory, reboots are meant to attract a new, much younger audience, hence the need to deliver a fresh take on the IP. But every time there's a reboot, the people who are most likely to tune in are the fans who grew up watching the original, while newcomers are, less likely to give a damn. And ironically, that's exactly what ended up happening to the new Masters of the Universe movie. Though nowadays, they appear to take a little less risks with reboots, going for much safer options, leaning a lot more into fan service, at least on the surface level, which is why I think if ThunderCats ever gets another— Wait, what the hell? It's already getting one! And it's an animated film!
Ooh. And now? What was that you were saying earlier about these two franchises being too niche as opposed to some of the other beloved 80s properties?
Touché.
Oh, would you look at that? I spent all this time just going on, and you finished your piece long ago. That's, interesting.
What's interesting?
The way you drew the ThunderCats. You know, just the whole cast, but only half of Lion-O. Is that a stylistic choice?
Let's just say this is only half the artwork. The other half is intended for something else.
Ooh. Perhaps we will find out what that is in Brightest Day. Or perhaps the Blackest Night.
Well, I guess that's it for today.
Be sure to stay tuned for part 2 to see what's on the other side of this artwork. And let us know what you thought of ThunderCats in general, and how did you feel about the 2011 reboot.
And before we leave, I have an important observation to make. By the time this video hits the internet, it's already gonna be 1 year since we released the very first episode of this series.
Happy late anniversary to our Sketchy podcast series!
And as always, thanks for your participation, White Cat.
As always, it's my pleasure, buddy.
And thanks y'all for stopping by. See y'all.
See ya, folks.